Very impressive, actually, in many regards. I think people have got preconceptions, misconceptions maybe about Rwanda, but it is clear that this is a place that is determined in many regards to be welcoming, to signify that it is open to migrants from across the world to potentially move here, and they're very proud of their city and their country as a welcoming place. Though it must be said, I've just spent the last 30 minutes with the Prime Minister and the other journalists that are following him around at the Ambassador's residence here in Kigali. Unsurprisingly, most of the questions that the Prime Minister was kind of batting away and having to field were on leadership and whether he will carry on being Prime Minister in the wake of those two by-election defeats yesterday and the resignation of Oliver Dowden. Prime Minister repeatedly insisted he would carry on, that he wanted to focus on, he believes, the issues that matter to the public: cost of living crisis, the rising cost of fuel, the migrant crisis that we're seeing in the English Channel, and that people should focus a bit less on the things that he says where people might think he's stuffed up. That in the end he wants to focus on people's priorities, and that he's not going to go anywhere anytime soon, that he's determined to carry on as Prime Minister. Perhaps unsurprising, but it is fair to say that while he is here in Rwanda, things are pretty tricky, aren't they, politically back home for him. He was asked about that meeting with Prince Charles yesterday, though as always in these circumstances, and as you know, Prime Ministers and conversations with the members of the royal family always remain secret. He would not be drawn on that. We don't think in the end actually this issue of Rwanda and the migrant situation was brought up between the two. And also, just to add to all of this, there were lots and lots of other questions about the Prime Minister's role here in Rwanda, what he's actually doing, because you have to remember he is at a Commonwealth summit. And this afternoon he's going to go away essentially with the other leaders, another kind of 50 leaders essentially, to a retreat just outside the city. Just the leaders, no aides. We're going to talk an awful lot about kind of the big global issues, not least of all what's happening with Ukraine and this desire to try and see lots of the grain, lots of the food that's been held in the ports of Ukraine, to try and get that released. Because clearly rising massive food prices is a big issue in sub-Saharan Africa. We've seen a massive spike in the cost of grain that has an impact on the cost of everyday goods here. And I think there's a determination from the Prime Minister to try and get Commonwealth leaders, and he's going to move on to the G7 later on tonight in Germany, and then to NATO next week in Madrid, to try and see if there is a way to get that food from those ports in Odessa and elsewhere in Ukraine out of the Black Sea and to the rest of the world. But ultimately, while the Prime Minister does want to focus on those big global issues, frankly, a lot of his time, and let's be perfectly honest about this, a lot of his time is focused on those really difficult domestic troubles and whether he can get through not just the next couple of days, but the next couple of weeks and months as Prime Minister.